edition of the Upper Deck Report, finding us on the upperdeck.com. Today, Al, we're live here at the Brunswick Zone in Burnsville. We're here to talk a little baseball, and I understand we have an interview coming up with the number 2 rated Burnsville Legion team in the state of Minnesota. Is that correct?
Yeah, we've got Coach Nesbitt. They lost to Eastview, the number 1 team in District 3. But I will have Burnsville here. I followed them for that the qualifying tournament,
right.
District tournament. Now the state tournament's going to start at 3 or 4 different sites, with Burnsville playing over in Eden Prairie.
And we will be covering many of those games and following the action as we go through the state tournament as we determine who is the best Legion team in Minnesota. Well, as you know, we're getting to the meat, the heart, the long days of summer of baseball.
For sure.
You know, we can just pretend like we'll ignore the whole football frenzy going on right now. And let's talk about what has to be, I think, one of the more interesting Twin seasons I've seen in a while. Not so much because of its success, but because what we're seeing with such an interesting array of talent and managing decisions that are going on. And, you know, one of the big decisions they have to face at this time of the season is, do we trade? Do we go big? Do we go home? Are we done?
Are we buyers or sellers?
So, right. What are we doing?
Well,
what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I tell you what, right now, I think the Twins are in limbo.
Yeah.
They don't know what they need, who they need, and when they need them. With the way this roster's developed over the year with Ron Gardenhire and the general manager, Billy Smith, and Mike Radcliffe, the player director, these guys don't really know if they're going to stay healthy.
Yeah.
So how do you make a trade if you can't keep your players on the field? Therefore, what do you actually need? Right now, Delman Young's back, Kubal's back, Tomey's back, Maurer's back in the lineup.
And he's coming back. He's playing stronger. He's been an all-star at first base. It's ridiculous the plays he's making.
Most definitely. He's made that transition very well, which in itself can make Justin Morneau expendable. The other day's headline says, where's Michael Kadire going to end up at the trading deadline?
Right.
So the Minnesota Twins are in some kind of limbo at this point in the season. Are we buyers or are we sellers?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. And when you look at the idea of the kind of players we have coming back, our needs are not clear. But what I really want, and this is what I was thinking about on the way over here, Al, is just give me a signal. Are we contenders? Because on Monday, we were getting our butt handed to us. We had an outfielder pitching in the 8th inning, yeah. But then the next day, we're down and we come back against the hottest team in baseball and beat them in the bottom of the 9th, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, which Twins is going to show up? But that's really my question is, how do we determine which Twins are going to show up? Because that's really, in many ways, the second part of that formula. Are we buyers or sellers based on what we need? And is there a need to be buying or selling?
Well, I tell you what, that's why Ron Gardenhire gets paid the big bucks, and we're paid to second guess him. But in my opinion, right now, I don't think the Twins are truly contenders. They're up and down, up and down. I think one of the main reasons why is they can't stay healthy. Just take, for example, the rotation. Baker was the hottest pitcher going into the All-Star break, and his last start before the All-Star break, when he had a chance to possibly be on the All-Star team, he hurts his elbow. He's starting to come back now, but those are type of injuries that will continue to persist as the season goes on, and we just don't know what the Twins are capable of.
Yeah, and I struggle when I watch the pitching, and one of the areas and the statistic that has concerned me the most this season is that run differential is just getting out of control. I mean, we're close to 500. The run differential should show some ability to hit, and it's just is it a deal where when we're getting blown out so bad, and then we're winning by a point every now and then? But what kind of health does that indicate for the team when you're that far behind in your run differential?
As we just see, Carlos Beltran was acquired by the San Francisco Giants. But to answer your question, now that starts the frenzy right there.
Yeah.
A big-name player getting picked up. But what happens to the Minnesota Twins? Are they buyers or sellers? Can they stay healthy? Can they keep their players on the field? The uncertainty is the reason why, obviously, they're at 4th place behind the White Sox, Detroit, and Cleveland. And they can't contend with consistency.
No.
Because that rotation is down. The hitting, as you alluded to, is the run differential is so overwhelmingly lopsided that you can't gain momentum offensively. With the players going out and coming into the lineup, there's no continuity. This team, if they win this division, they're not going to get the wild card. They must win the division. They're going to have to get on some kind of run to win 85 to 87 ball games, which is what I think it's going to take to win the Central.
Oh, I think so too. Those teams are going to get beat the crap out of themselves as they go on deeper in the schedule, and it's going to be just kind of a slugfest. And I have to agree that two things. First of all, right now, they're not a team that should be buying at this point. I'm not sure what selling would look like for them at this point, and that's probably the next question. On top of that, though, there's going to have to be a 10 to 15 game streak, you know, where they really rock it up there and they show some consistent baseball. I'm not saying it's got to be domination of the other teams, but it's got to be consistent, positive playing. I mean, you look at the number of errors we committed in that game where we lost 18-6. It was painful. It was just painful. Our fielding is just atrocious right now.
And I tell you what, Ike, as we talk about the Minnesota Twins, you just described their season in a nutshell. The inconsistency in every phase of the game has been there. Therefore, even though Gardenhire was the manager of the year, it just goes to prove that if you don't have players, you can't contend. And right now, the Minnesota Twins are somewhat pretenders. If they're even pretenders, because they're not contenders for the American League Central at this point in time of the season. And when they do get healthy and they get everybody back on the field, it may be too late.
Yeah, I don't know if they're going to be able to make a run like that. And when I look at the hitting, I'm not saying that we have to have this great positive run differential, but the consistency, you know, and when we give up, and you know, when you have a situation.
Well, when you're over 80 runs, that's way too many. And if you're over 80 home runs, 80 runs behind, and you don't have a power hitting team, that deficit's always going to be there. And the ability to play close games is a great attribute that contending teams do have. But you mentioned their defensive failures. Not only a lack of coverage in the outfield, but the inconsistency of Nishioka at shortstop and Casilla at second base. That is not a trait of a championship ball club, and right now they're struggling in all phases.
So if you were to look at then the possibility of, let's just pretend for a second on that road that we're sellers instead of buyers. What kind of arrangement do you think the Twins would be looking for? Are they looking to bring in some young talent for pitching for next year, looking to bring in some bats for next year, and who do you think would be the person we'd be trading for something like that?
Well, I tell you what, I'm going to name three guys that I normally talk about when people ask me that question. Number one, obviously, on everybody's tote board would be Michael Cuddyer. A multi-dimensional player, speed, power, good arm, good person in the community. He's probably the hottest commodity the Twins has. Plus, he represented the team at the 2011 All-Star game. The other two right now are either injured or coming off the disabled list. I think with the fact that Mauer has played so well at first base and can catch and DH on days when he's not behind the plate, makes Justin Morneau expendable to a certain degree. The M&M boys never really got to stay on the field much after their first 2 or 3 years in the major leagues, and these last 3 years have been injury plagued for both of them. So I think that makes Morneau expendable, but yet is his contract too much for another team to take on? And my third question mark here is, if you don't put Kubel as a DH for next year, do you let him go via free agency, or do you try to trade him now? Because he's due a pretty good contract. His numbers have said so. The last 2 or 3 years, he and Mr. Delman Young have each put up big numbers, and their contracts are going to mean somebody has to go.
Well, I mean, and just side note, in terms of roster moves, do you see Butera, if Mauer does switch over to first base, do we see Butera staying at catcher?
No, that's where you pick up in a trade. When you trade one of these guys, you try to get a middle reliever and a catcher. You try to get two pieces that are average big league players, because believe it or not, folks, most of the players in the big leagues are just average. There's not very many superstars. Everybody's on an even playing field, except for guys like Morneau, Mauer, and that upper echelon of players. So if you could get two average players back for Justin Morneau or Jason Kubel, then you've done your job. I think it's a decent trade for the ball club.
Right, I do too. Well, like I said, this is the Upper Deck Report here at the Brunswick Zone. Coming up in our next section, we're going to be doing an interview with Burnsville head coach and the #2 team in Minnesota as they head into the State Legion playoffs. It should be an exciting weekend of some fun baseball. So we'll be back here in just a few moments.